Hey everybody, hope you're doing well today. We've been talking about fall protection, and we've talked specifically about pressure and how it's the pressure on a worker's body resulting from a fall that causes injury to the worker, causes damage to the worker's body. The body's very durable, but we can generate fall forces and fall pressures that can break the body, can break bones, can crush skulls, can cause organs to rupture. Controlling pressure is what fall protection is all about. We want to eliminate any pressure on the body if we can. If we can't eliminate pressure, we want to limit the amount of pressure that could harm the worker. In this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through the process for calculating pressure based upon the weight of the worker, the height of the fall, and some other variables as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Also, this will help you complete the practice problems and the quiz. So I encourage you to watch this as many times as you need to. You can slow it down, you can rewind. That's one of the good things about videos. You can stop it if you need to, or rewind if you need to. But let's go ahead and take a look at this situation that we're talking about. We have a 145-pound worker who falls 23 feet from the roof of a house. He lands on his shoulder on normal soil. The contact area where his shoulder makes contact with the ground is 5 inches by 4 inches, and the deceleration distance is 2 inches. What is the pressure per square inch exerted on the worker? All right. Now pressure, the formula for pressure, let me go ahead and write that down because pressure is what we're after. Pressure equals force divided by area. All right, simple formula. The only problem is we don't know what the force is. We have the area. The area is 20 square inches, 5 inches by 4 inches. But we have to backtrack a little bit and calculate force. So let's take a look at the formula for force. Go ahead and write that down. Force equals W A divided by G. And the W is the weight of the worker, which we have. Or if you were doing falling objects, it would be the weight of the object, but weight of the worker. A is the rate of deceleration, which we don't have. Now G is a constant. That's the acceleration of gravity constant, 32.2 feet per second. And we're doing all these calculations in imperial measurements, feet and inches. But the problem here is we still don't have what we need to calculate force. We have to find the rate of deceleration. Let me show you that formula. Okay. Rate of deceleration, A is for deceleration or rate of deceleration, equals the velocity squared divided by 2, which is a constant, and D, which is the deceleration distance. Okay, we have velocity that we need to calculate the rate of deceleration. We need the distance in which the body decelerates, which we have that deceleration distance, that's given to us. So we're good there. But we're going to have to go back one more step to calculate velocity. And here's the formula for velocity. Velocity equals the square root of v sub 0 squared plus 2gs. Okay, and let's talk about what these variables mean. Okay, velocity equals the square root of v sub 0 squared plus 2gs. Okay, first of all, 2 is a constant. Don't have to worry about that. G is also a constant, which is, again, 32.2 feet per second squared, or 32.2 when we plug it into our formula. And S is the fall distance, which is given to us in 23. Now, V sub 0, that's the velocity, that's the initial velocity. The worker has 0 initial velocity. So once we get into the calculation, we can ignore V sub 0. Let me go ahead and change my canvas here so I have more room to write, and we'll go ahead and start with velocity. Again, what we're doing here to get pressure, we have to calculate velocity first. Then we have to calculate the rate of deceleration, and once we have that, we can calculate the force. Then once we have the force, we can calculate the pressure. So, okay. Let's calculate velocity. Okay, let's go ahead and calculate velocity, and I strongly recommend that you do it just the way I'm going to lay everything out, iteration by iteration. I'm going to start with the formula, and then I'm going to work down with multiple iterations. The reason for doing this, I know it seems tedious and unnecessary, but when you do it this way, it keeps you from getting lost. It keeps you on track. And if you do have a problem, it's easy to go back and see where you made a mistake or where you entered the wrong number. Okay, again, we need velocity first, so let's go ahead and enter our formula for velocity. V sub 0 squared plus 2gs. Okay, now let's start plugging everything in. There is no initial velocity. The subject is not moving, so that's 0. Go ahead and plug in a 0 there. 2 is a constant. 32.2 is g, the acceleration of gravity, and our distance is 23 feet. And pardon my messy writing. All right, now we have all of our numbers plugged in. Now it's time to do a little bit of math. Let me bring my calculator up here if I can find it, and we will do a little bit of math. We want 2 times 32 times 23. 2 times 32.2 times 23 equals 1481.2. So remember, 0 times 0 is 0, so we can just forget about that. But we do need to write down our 1481.2. Now all we need to do is take the square root of that. So bring my calculator back up. And I'm used to using a TI-30, but I can't bring my TI-30 up on the screen, so I'm attempting to use the Windows Scientific Calculator. Hopefully it works. And I think with this particular calculator, you have to enter the number 1481.2, and then you hit the square root button. Sure enough, that's what it is, 38.48. And I'm going to round that to 38.5. Our velocity is 38.5 feet per second. This is how fast the worker is traveling when he hits the ground. This is his velocity at impact. All right, when we come back, now that we have velocity, we can calculate the rate of deceleration. We're working on a pressure calculation, and we've already calculated velocity. Let me go ahead and write that down. Whoops, almost wrote the wrong thing down. 38.5 feet per second is the impact velocity for this worker. We're going to use this impact velocity to calculate the rate of deceleration for the worker. And again, we need all this to get to pressure. Be nice if we could just use the information in the problem, calculate pressure directly, but can't do it. So we need to calculate the rate of deceleration. Let me write down the formula for the rate of deceleration. Velocity squared divided by 2, which is a constant, and d, which is the distance of acceleration, or deceleration distance. Deceleration distance. All right, now we plug in our numbers. We have everything we need. We have velocity, 38.5, and we're going to square that. We have 2, which is a constant. Then we also have our deceleration distance, which is 2 inches. But it needs to be in feet. So we need to do a simple calculation here to translate or to convert the inches to feet. So 2 inches divided by 12 inches and a foot. That 2 inches is the equivalent of 0.167 feet. Okay, now it's just a simple calculation. 38.5 squared is 1482.25. Go ahead and bring that down in this iteration. 1482.25. Now we need to multiply 2 times 0.167. Yeah, I paused there for a second. I thought my recorder had stopped recording. That happens occasionally, and that's very frustrating when it does happen. Okay, so 2 times 0.167 is 0.334. And I'm going to go ahead and round that to 0.33 at this point. Now all we have is a division. We need to divide 1482.25 divided by 0.33. That's going to give us our rate of deceleration. And as we've talked about in class, the lower the rate of deceleration, the less injury to the worker. A soft surface where you have a lower rate of deceleration, that's better for the worker. Let's see, calculator, 1482.25 divided by 0.33 equals 4,491.66, and we'll round that to 0.7. Our rate of deceleration is 4,491.7, and this is also in feet per second, just like our velocity was. This is how fast the body's slowing down. And with only a 2-inch deceleration distance, that means the worker, when he hits the ground, he's stopping pretty suddenly. It's that sudden stop that's the problem. If he was falling in mud, if he was falling on a pad of some sort, his deceleration distance would be increased, and the impact on his body would be less, or her body. So that's our rate of deceleration. And now we can use the rate of deceleration along with the other information to calculate the impact force, the force on the body when the worker hits the ground. Okay. We have rate of deceleration, which is 4,491.7 feet per second. Now we can use that to calculate force, and we're getting real close to the pressure calculation that we're looking for. But the force needs to be calculated first. Okay, force equals the weight of the worker, or the weight of the object, in this case it's a worker, multiplied by the rate of deceleration and divided by the acceleration of gravity constant, which is 32.2. So let's just go. We've got everything, plug it in. Worker weighs 145 pounds. The rate of deceleration is 4,491.7. Then our acceleration of gravity, G, is 32.2. Go ahead and do our intermediate calculations. Whoops, sorry about that. We've got 145, the weight of the worker, multiplied by 4,491.7 for the rate of deceleration. We end up with 651,296.5. Let's go ahead and record that. 651,296.5. Again, 651,296.5. Then our constant, go ahead and bring that down. All we have left is a division. We need to divide the numerator by the denominator. And I've already got this in here, this number, 651,296.5, so I'm not going to enter it again. Divided by 32.2 equals 20,226.6 pounds of force on the worker. That's how many pounds of force. And when the worker falls, 145 pound worker falls 23 feet and lands on this type of soil with that contact area, there's over 20,000 pounds of force on their body. And the unit that we're talking about here is referred to as pound force. Okay, 20,226.6 pound force. Now we can calculate the pressure, because it's really the pressure that's the issue. If this 20,000 pounds is distributed over a wide area, the damage is not going to be as great. But if this 20,000 pounds of force is focused on one small part of the worker's body, like the shoulder that they're falling on, then it's going to do more damage. If they landed flat on their back, they would be better off because the force would be better distributed. But they landed on their shoulder, so it's not going to be as distributed, and the pressure is going to be greater. All right, we're at the very last step in the pressure calculation. Again, we're calculating the impact pressure. We have calculated the force on the worker at 20,226.6 pound force. Now we can use that to calculate the area, or we can calculate the pressure using this and the area. Pressure equals force divided by area. Plug everything in. Our force is 20,226.6. Our area is 5 inches by 4 inches, and it's okay to work in inches. We don't have to be in feet because we're calculating pressure in pounds per square inch. So 5 times 4 to get our square inches. Now all we need to do is this division. 20,226.6 divided by 20. Okay, our pressure, the pressure exerted on this worker's body is 1,011 psi. Let's just go ahead and round it to 1,011 psi. Now it takes about 1,100 pounds of force to crack a skull. So he's probably not going to get a cracked skull, but it doesn't take very much force at all to break the clavicle and the other bones in the shoulder region. Also, that kind of pressure is going to cause the organs within his sternum, within his torso, to be bounced around inside the rib cage, and there's going to likely be internal damage. The brain will be moving around inside the skull, likely to be damage to the brain as well. Is this survivable? Maybe, but probably not, given this many pounds of force per square inch that are being exerted on the worker. But again, that's a quick rundown of the process for calculating pressure exerted on a worker from a fall. Again, let me just reiterate, if the fall was shorter, the pressure would be less. If the worker was heavier, the pressure would be more. If the deceleration distance was greater, the pressure would be less. If the contact area was larger, the pressure would be less. All of these different variables go together to determine the forces, the pressures exerted on a worker when they fall. Now, this explains how some workers are able to fall 30, 40 feet, but because of the way they fall, the way they land, the pressure on their body's not as great. You've probably heard me tell the story before about the worker who fell off the bridge into the water. Fell into the water, it was shallow water, had a muddy bottom. And he walked away. No injuries at all from that 30-foot fall. Which it is possible. But it's also possible that a worker could fall 4 feet and hit on the corner of his head. That could be, the pressures could be much greater. And one of your practice problems is just that scenario. A worker falls 4 feet, hits his head, hits the corner of his head with a small impact area, and the pressures are very great. All right, well, that's it for this problem. Let me know if you have any questions. And there's also another video where I use a different approach to illustrate, but I wanted to show you how to write everything out, show you how I do it and how I recommend you approach problems like this. All right, have a good day, and I will see you in class.